When my fiancé's parents told him that I was not marriage material, I felt something inside me fall quiet, like a small lamp being blown out in the middle of a long night. And even though their words touched something painful in me, I kept my smile steady, because I had learned long ago that silence is sometimes stronger than explanation, and that dignity grows when noise cannot reach the heart. So I stood there, listening to their gentle but firm voices telling him that I was not suitable. Not polished enough, not the kind of woman who would help their family rise or maintain the image they had built in society. And I remember how the rain tapped lightly on the window that day, how the cold breeze moved the curtains, and how I looked down at my hands to stop myself from trembling. I grew up without much, and I never hid that fact. My childhood home was small, with cracked walls and an uneven floor, but it was filled with warmth and the smell of my mother's cooking, and even though life was often heavy, I carried my experiences with quiet pride. I worked hard through school, studied late at night, saved every coin, and eventually built something of my own, slowly, step by step, without telling people how far I had come or how much I had achieved, because I believed that real success never needed to be announced. I met Daniel 2 years ago, in one of those soft, unforgettable moments that stay in the heart like a warm memory. He was gentle, thoughtful, and kind in a way that reminded me of the things people rarely talk about anymore: patience, respect, and steady loyalty. We grew close in simple ways: longer conversations, shared meals after long workdays, the quiet comfort of knowing someone was listening. When he proposed to me, I felt the world pause for a second. It was a Sunday morning, sunlight coming across the floor, his voice soft and full of the future. But now here I was, sitting in his parents' living room, where everything was neat and expensive, the kind of place that seemed to measure people before letting them feel welcome. His mother looked at me with a polite smile that carried distance in it, and she said, "You seem like a sweet girl, but marriage is a long road, and we want someone who matches our family's expectations." She did not finish the sentence because she didn't need to. I had heard words like that before. People like me are often judged by the way we dress, the neighborhoods we come from, and the stories we don't tell. Daniel tried to defend me, his voice shaking with frustration, but his father raised a hand gently and said, "Son, love is one thing. Marriage is another. A wife should bring stability, background, and a good impression. She cannot offer what you need." I looked at Daniel then, and his eyes were full of sadness, as if he could not decide whether to fight or to listen. I did not want to be the reason he lost peace with his family, so I placed my hand lightly on his arm, a soft signal for him to breathe, and I told his parents in the calmest voice I could find, "I understand your concerns. I really do. You don't know me well yet." His mother nodded, as though relieved that I wasn't arguing. She thought my gentleness was weakness, but it was something else entirely. What she didn't know was that the small house I once lived in was only the beginning of my story, not the end. What she didn't know was that the business I built, through long nights and quiet perseverance, had grown far beyond what most people assumed. But I never talked about it because wealth, to me, was a responsibility, not a bragging right. I carried it lightly, quietly, like a secret that didn't need applause. That day, as I sat in that elegant room, listening to people measure my worth with the wrong scale, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and peace. Sadness because I wished I could be accepted for who I truly was. Peace because I knew their judgment did not define me. After a few moments of silence, Daniel's mother added softly, "You are kind, but kindness is not enough to build a stable marriage. Our son needs someone from a proper family, someone with refinement." The word proper stayed in my mind like a cold shadow. I thanked them for sharing their thoughts. My voice did not shake. My hands remained steady. I did not tell them about the properties I owned, about the investments I had made, or about the company that quietly grew under my guidance. I did not mention that I had already reached a point where financial need would never be a concern again. None of that mattered at that moment. I walked outside when the conversation ended, and the air felt heavy but fresh at the same time, like the world understood my heart better than the people inside that house. Daniel followed me quickly, holding my hand, apologizing again and again, promising he would stand by me no matter what his parents said. I looked at him with a soft smile, the kind that hides more emotion than it shows, and I said, "It's all right. Let time speak for us." I didn't want anger to fill him. I didn't want conflict to tear his family apart. I wanted truth to reveal itself slowly, naturally, the way morning sunlight reveals everything in gentle pieces. That night when I went home, I sat by my window with a cup of warm tea, listening to the distant hum of the city, thinking about life and how people often judge without understanding the full picture. I felt a small ache inside, but I also felt a deep strength. I knew who I was. I knew where I came from. And I knew that the truth, even when quiet, always finds a way to be seen. I promised myself that I would move forward with grace, with patience, and with the calm belief that one day, his parents would see more than they saw today. Not because I wanted to impress them. Not because I needed their approval. But because the world has a way of uncovering what people overlook, and the value of a person is not determined by birthplace, background, or appearance. As I finished my tea and closed my window, I whispered a small thought into the quiet night. One day, they will understand. And with that, I closed my eyes, letting the gentle stillness wrap around me like a blanket of hope. In the days that followed, I felt a gentle distance forming around me, like a thin layer of fog separating me from the world, soft but noticeable. And even though Daniel tried to keep everything normal, I could feel the heaviness in his voice, the quiet worry in his eyes, and the way he held my hand a little tighter, as if afraid I might slip away. We still met every evening after work. We still shared dinner at the small cafe we both liked, and we still talked about our future, but underneath those conversations lived a quiet uncertainty, like a thread stretched too thin. I did not blame him for the situation, and I did not blame his parents for the way they saw me, because people often protect what they think is best, even if their judgment is cloudy. Still, their words had planted something in him, questions, fears, hesitations, and I could sense them even when he tried to hide them behind a smile. One evening, as we sat outside on a wooden bench, watching the soft glow of streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement, he finally spoke the words he had been carrying. He said, "I know my parents were wrong, but I can't stop thinking about what they said. Not because I agree with them, but because I don't want you to face that pain again." His voice was gentle, with a tremble that he tried to mask. I looked at him for a long moment, then leaned my shoulder against his. "Pain is a part of life," I whispered, "but love can make space around it." He nodded, though he didn't look fully convinced. I could tell he was trying to protect me, to shield me from future hurt, yet in doing so he was creating a small wall between us, one he didn't realize he was building. I went home that night feeling the weight of something unspoken, something that lingered between our hearts like a thin curtain fluttering in the wind. I sat on my bed, the lights dim, the room filled with the soft hum of the city, and I thought about how relationships sometimes bend under pressure, even when two people love each other deeply. But I also believed in patience, in allowing time to reveal what the heart cannot express in words. Meanwhile, life outside our relationship continued. My business was moving through one of its busiest seasons. I managed most of my work quietly from a small office, without any sign that it was the center of something much larger. My staff respected my privacy, and I preferred it that way. We were preparing for a major expansion, a new facility, new partnerships, a bigger footprint in the market. The investment I had placed years ago was now blooming in ways I never imagined, and sometimes, in the late hours of the night, when I reviewed numbers and plans, I felt a quiet pride, like seeing a long-planted seed finally grow strong. But I told no one, not even Daniel, because I wanted to build a life with him that was based on love, not wealth or surprise. Still, somewhere deep inside me, I felt a soft ache from knowing his parents believed I had nothing to offer. I tried not to carry their words with me, yet they followed sometimes like a faint echo. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel invited me to his home again. He said his parents wanted to try again, which made me smile, though I also felt a flutter of worry. I wore a simple dress, one I'd had for years, because I didn't want to change myself to please anyone. I wanted them to see me as I truly was. When I arrived, his mother greeted me with a polite smile, softer than before but still distant, and his father nodded with the same measured calm. They invited me to sit at the dining table where everything was arranged neatly as if trying to create harmony through order. We talked about simple things at first, the weather, Daniel's work, the upcoming holidays. I answered politely, keeping my voice steady and warm. But eventually, gently, his mother leaned forward and asked, "So, what do you do again?" "Daniel mentioned you have some small work. Is it part-time?" There was no malice in her tone, only misunderstanding. "I run a business," I said quietly. She nodded, waiting for more detail, but I did not give any. I didn't want to list achievements as if trying to buy respect. His father cleared his throat. "Business can be very unstable. Do you have plans to do something more secure?" For a moment, the room felt smaller, the air thicker. I looked at Daniel, and he looked down at the table. Smiled softly and said, "I understand your concerns." His mother responded with a sigh as though she had expected that answer. There were no raised voices, no sharp words. Everything was calm, polite, wrapped in gentle judgment. When I left their home that day, Daniel walked me to my car. He looked more troubled than before. "I'm sorry," he said. "I want them to see you the way I do." I touched his hand and whispered, "They will, but not because we argue or try to prove anything. They need time." He nodded, though the worry in his eyes did not fade. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not bitterness, but a quiet realization that sometimes people only see the surface of things because they have never learned to look deeper. And I understood that to them, I would always appear small until life itself placed them in front of the truth. Days passed. Daniel grew more quiet, and our conversations became shorter, filled with pauses and hidden emotions. He was torn between his love for me and the voices he had grown up hearing his entire life. I knew he needed space to think, so I gave it to him without complaint, trusting that love would guide him. One evening, as I closed my office after a long day, I stood for a moment in the doorway, watching the last light fade across the sky. I felt both tired and strong. I knew a turning point was coming, though I did not know when. All I knew was that silence reveals character, patience reveals truth, and love reveals hearts. And deep inside, I whispered to myself, "Let everything unfold in its own time. What is meant for me will not pass me." With that thought, I stepped into the quiet night, ready for whatever life would place in my path next. Life has a quiet way of revealing truths, not through grand moments or loud announcements, but through gentle turns of fate, and it was during one of these quiet turns that everything began to change, though at the time I did not realize how deeply it would affect all of us. It started with an invitation, an elegant envelope delivered to my office, one that looked out of place among the simple, practical papers on my desk. The envelope carried the crest of a well-known investment group, one that Daniel's parents greatly admired and often spoke of with pride. They were hosting a private event for entrepreneurs and partners, and they wanted me to attend as one of their featured guests. My name, printed in delicate gold, seemed almost foreign to me, as if it belonged to someone else, someone more accustomed to being seen. I held the envelope for a long moment, remembering how Daniel's parents had asked if I planned to pursue something more secure, and I wondered what they would think if they saw this. But I did not smile with triumph. Instead, I felt a calm humility wash over me. I had built my business quietly for years, working in the background, leading without needing the spotlight. Recognition was never my goal. Still, this event was important for my company's future, and I knew I should attend. That evening when Daniel and I met for dinner, I told him about the invitation. He stared at me for a moment, surprise widening his eyes. "You're a featured guest, that's a big deal." His voice carried admiration, but also confusion, as if he was seeing me in a new light he had never considered before. I nodded gently and said, "It's part of the expansion we've been planning." He blinked, trying to connect the dots. "Expansion? You never said your business was this big." I gave a small smile. "You never asked." He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, as though unsure where to begin. After a few moments, he whispered, "I think I underestimated how much you've accomplished." His words weren't meant to hurt, but a small ache bloomed in my chest. Not because he realized it late, but because it reminded me how often people saw only the surface of me. For a while, we ate in silence, listening to the distant sounds of traffic and the soft clinking of cups from the cafe counter. Finally, he reached for my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said, "really proud." I held his hand gently, letting his words sink into the quiet space between us. A week later, the night of the event arrived. I wore a simple navy dress, nothing extravagant, just elegant enough for the occasion. My hair fell softly around my shoulders, and I kept my makeup light. I never wanted to appear as someone I was. When I stepped into the grand hall, warm lights glowed from chandeliers, casting golden reflections across the marble floor. Soft music drifted through the room, creating a gentle, welcoming atmosphere. People greeted me warmly, investors, partners, entrepreneurs, all of them knowing my name, my work, and the quiet impact my company had made. I moved through the room with calm steps, shaking hands, exchanging small smiles, answering questions with steady ease. It felt surreal, but also natural, as if I had always belonged in spaces like this, even though life had raised me far from such rooms. About an hour into the event, I heard a familiar voice behind me, a voice filled with polite surprise. You are here." I turned and saw Daniel's parents standing near the entrance, dressed elegantly, their expressions frozen in shock. They had been invited by the hosting investment group, of course. They attended these events regularly, but they had never expected to see me among the honored guests. For a long second, none of us spoke. Then his mother stepped closer, her eyes scanning my name badge, her breath catching softly when she read the title beneath it, Founder and CEO. You run this company?" she whispered. I nodded gently. Yes. His father's face shifted, confusion mixing with a kind of hesitant respect. Your business is part of the expansion project. One of the main partners, I replied softly. The silence that followed was thick and fragile, like glass that could break with one wrong word. They looked around the room again, noticing how people greeted me, how individuals of high status addressed me with genuine warmth, how the organizers thanked me personally for attending. Slowly, their expressions softened, the certainty they once held about me beginning to crumble. His mother spoke first, her voice trembling just slightly. We didn't know. I gave her a gentle smile, one without bitterness. You didn't need to know, people's worth isn't measured by what they own or what they show. She lowered her eyes, shame flickering across her face. We misjudged you terribly. I didn't speak right away. I wanted my silence to carry the message that words alone cannot erase what was said before. But eventually, I whispered, it's all right. Understanding comes in its own time. Just then Daniel entered the hall, saw me, and rushed over with a warm smile. But his smile faded into shock when he noticed his parents standing beside me. Mom, Dad, you're talking to her. His father cleared his throat. We had no idea who she really was. I looked gently toward him and said, I'm still the same person you met in your home. Nothing about me has changed. His mother's eyes softened and she whispered, no, but everything about our understanding has. For the rest of the evening, they watched me with a different expression, one of quiet respect, maybe even admiration. They didn't interrupt me or ask questions. They simply observed, learning silently. Later, when the event began winding down, his mother approached me softly. May we invite you to dinner, properly this time? Her voice carried a sincerity that hadn't been there before. I hesitated for a moment, not out of anger, but to let the past settle gently between us. Then I nodded. Yes, I'd like that. When the night ended and I stepped outside into the cool air, Daniel wrapped his arms around me. I'm amazed, he whispered. You handled everything with so much grace. I leaned against him, feeling the quiet heartbeat of the city around us. Life reveals people when the time is right, I murmured. Tonight was that time. As we stood there beneath the soft glow of streetlights, I felt a gentle peace spread through me. The truth had begun to unfold, not through confrontation but through presence, not through pride but through calm strength. And in that moment, I knew the story was not finished yet. Something deeper, something healing, was still to come, waiting quietly just beyond the next sunrise. The dinner invitation came a few days after the event, handwritten on a simple white card, and though I could sense the nervousness behind the words, the gesture itself felt warm, almost like a quiet apology wrapped in hope, and I accepted it without hesitation because I believed that people can grow, that hearts can soften when truth brings light into places where misunderstanding once lived. The night of the dinner, I arrived at Daniel's home with steady breaths, reminding myself that forgiveness does not erase the past, but it does make room for a gentler future. The house was softly lit, the air filled with the warm smell of cooked vegetables and spices, a simple meal prepared with care rather than show. When Daniel opened the door, his eyes held a mixture of pride and relief, as if he had been waiting for this moment to finally let his heart breathe. His parents stood behind him, looking more humble than I had ever seen them, their faces carrying the weight of reflection and the quiet hope for reconciliation. His mother stepped forward first, her hands twisting slightly as if unsure what to do with them, and she said, in a voice softer than I had ever heard from her, "Thank you for coming." I smiled gently, feeling the sincerity in her tone. "Thank you for inviting me." We sat together in the dining room, the same place where I once felt evaluated and measured, but this time the table felt different, less like a stage, more like a place where people come together to understand one another. The food was simple and warm, and for a while we spoke about small things, letting the tension melt quietly like ice in warm water. Eventually, his father cleared his throat, his eyes lowering for a moment before meeting mine again. "We misjudged you," he said quietly. "Not because you were unworthy, but because we were blind to what truly matters." His words carried genuine regret, the kind that comes from deep reflection rather than quick apology. I listened without interrupting, allowing him to share whatever rested on his heart. "We thought success came only in the forms we recognized," he continued. "We thought a person's worth was tied to background, family, appearance, but you showed us something different, something we should have always known." His wife nodded beside him, her eyes glistening just slightly in the soft light. You were gracious even when we weren't kind. You were humble when we judged you. That kind of character, she paused, searching for the right words. It deserves respect, deep respect. Their sincerity touched something inside me, not pride, not triumph, but a simple, gentle ache, the kind that comes from finally being seen after being overlooked for so long. I breathed slowly before answering. I understand why you felt the way you did, I said softly. People often protect what they love, and sometimes fear makes us forget to look deeper. They nodded, their faces softened by humility. We hope you can forgive us, his mother whispered. Not because we deserve it, but because we want to do better. I smiled, warm and genuine. I forgave you the moment I walked out of your house that first day. Holding onto pain only makes life heavier. I never wanted that for any of us. Relief washed across their faces, quiet but unmistakable, like a small light turning on in a long dark room. After dinner, we moved to the living area where the lights were dimmer and the atmosphere calmer. Daniel sat beside me, his hand resting gently on mine as if he wanted to hold the past in one hand and the future in the other. His parents asked questions, not about money, not about status, but about my childhood, my dreams, my struggles, my journey. They listened with full attention, their eyes softening with understanding as I shared small pieces of my life. My mother's long evenings working by lamplight, the days I walked miles to school, the nights I studied until dawn, the years I spent building my business slowly, quietly, with no guarantee of success. For the first time, they saw the person behind the name, behind the assumptions, behind the quiet exterior they had misread. And for the first time, I saw them not as judgmental parents, but as human beings who were learning, slowly, sincerely, how to see beyond the surface. Later, when the night grew quieter, Daniel walked me to their garden, a small place with soft yellow lights lining the pathway and the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. We stood beneath the old tree where he used to play as a child, and for a long moment we said nothing. Silence felt natural, comforting. Finally, he whispered, I'm grateful for you. I leaned my head gently against his shoulder. Why? He exhaled softly. Because you carried yourself with grace even when you were hurt, because you didn't try to prove anything, because you let the truth speak for itself. My parents are different now because of you. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words settle quietly in my heart. People change when they're ready, I said, and sometimes all they need is time. He held me closer, the air around us calm and cool, and in that moment I felt a sense of peace I had never known before, peace not from being right, but from being seen. A week later, his parents invited my family to meet them. It was a simple gathering, filled with laughter, warm cooking, and soft conversations. My mother sat beside his mother, the two of them talking gently like women who understood the world through the same set of quiet strengths and struggles. At one point, his father pulled me aside and said, You will make a wonderful part of this family. His words were slow, thoughtful, filled not with formality but true respect. I thanked him quietly, feeling gratitude settle deep in my chest. As the evening ended and everyone said their goodbyes, Daniel took my hand and whispered, So are you ready to start planning the wedding? I smiled, soft and warm, the kind of smile that carries both past and future in it. Yes, I whispered. I'm ready. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling with a gentle calmness in my heart, I thought about everything that had happened, the judgment, the quiet pain, the hidden success, the slow unfolding of truth, the shift from rejection to respect. And I realized something important. People may doubt your worth when they cannot see the whole story. But life has a way of revealing things when the time is right, gently lifting truth to the surface like sunlight rising over dark water. I closed my eyes with a soft, grateful breath, whispering to myself, In the end, kindness speaks louder than pride, and patience uncovers what judgment never sees. And with that final thought, wrapped in quiet warmth, I drifted into sleep, carrying peace, forgiveness, and the gentle glow of a future finally understood.